Happy Friday, everybody. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. And unfortunately, Sierra is not available, and she normally does this portion of the meeting, but it's a privilege to be able to do it in her place. Ken, I know Joe's going to introduce you in a minute, but I want to thank you for coming back. And I've had a chance to meet so many Hope of the Valley team members supporting our team with the lease up at the Cecil, and they're so motivated and passionate about their residents and their work and what they're doing that it's just been really cool to get to know them a little bit since the last time you were here. This month at the Trust, you guys, I know all of you know how hard everybody is working on focusing on move-ins and making sure that units are ready and that we're doing whatever it takes to accelerate getting folks into housing after they're matched through CES, and doing everything we can to get people with vouchers and rapid rehousing subsidies permanent homes at the Cecil. And I am delighted to report that so far in August, we have welcomed 55 of our formerly unhoused neighbors into permanent homes across our portfolio. So it's really tremendously exciting. We're also working on rebuilding and strengthening our teams. Joe had a terrific event this week where she and Veronica celebrated anniversaries for, folks with work anniversaries in the third quarter. And I believe that we've had 10 new hires this month, which is terrific. We want to make sure that, we have the right people in the right place focused on serving our residents, bringing them home and helping them thrive in housing. Our Seeds of Hope campaign to revitalize the community gardens in the 15 buildings that have them is moving along. In August, we hosted an event at Las Americas for the resident champions of the campaign and the committee members to get to know Nelson Mendoza and learn a little bit about what he's done to make that really magic garden there. And he's been wonderful in terms of his generosity. He loves sharing, and he's always giving cuttings of plants and seeds and advice and help and hard work to the other communities. So that's been a really exciting development. The garden at the Abbey was also, restored as part of a project that Lisa and Monica led this month. So we're moving along through the portfolio there. And we've got our gala coming up September 22nd at the Colburn School. Ken, I hope you can come. We always have unused sponsor tickets, and I'll talk a little bit more about the event at the end, but I'll turn it over to Joe to introduce our guest.
Thank you. And Jet, I must say I was at the Star this week, and the garden is phenomenal. All the basil is just growing out of control, and I mean it looks amazing. So everybody who worked on that, it's definitely awesome. So all right, Ken, it's good to meet you. Hi. Let me do a little intro for you. So Ken, you serve as the CEO of Hope of the Valley Rescue Mission. You founded Hope of the Valley in 2009, and you manage a staff of over 360 people, and I'm sure that is not an easy gig, 360 people. Individuals who manage housing operations, provide social services, and operate 5 thrift stores. Ken has overall responsibility for Hope of the Valley Rescue Mission's financial stability, personnel, marketing, and community awareness. He's also responsible for developing, implementing, and executing policies and procedures. And under his leadership, the organization has become a leading provider of housing and homeless services in the state of California. I don't think this is one of my questions, but I wonder if you get any sleep. Ken is an entrepreneurial leader who has dedicated his life to addressing the humanitarian crisis of homelessness, implementing a holistic approach to programming, outreach, and services. Ken has leveraged his knowledge, passion, and talents to build an organization that currently consists of 16 housing facilities with 1,532 beds between them. In total, Hope of the Valley has 23 site locations scattered across greater Los Angeles area. Ken and your lovely wife, Lori, serve together at the mission, and Lori is the organization's chief program officer. And together as a blended family, they have 7 children. Wow. Again, do you get any sleep? Probably not. So welcome, Ken. We're super excited to have you. So I'll start off with our first question. Some of our audience may remember you joining the virtual community meeting just over a year ago. So we are excited to have you back and hear what Hope of the Valley has been able to accomplish over this past year. But first, for those that may not be aware, can you fill us in a little about your background as a pastor and how that has inspired you to do the work that you do?
Yeah, well, again, thank you. It's a privilege to be able to spend some time with everybody. And I'm so thankful for all the various agencies that are working together in the greater Los Angeles area to address the humanitarian crisis. We're just one spoke in the wheel, and I'm so thankful there's lots of spokes in the wheel, everybody working together and doing their part. And so at Hope of the Valley, I had the privilege of starting the organization 13 years ago this month.
Wow.
I remember sitting at a Starbucks in Van Nuys and just thinking, what could happen if we could really mobilize people that were truly passionate about ending homelessness? And so how do you start a nonprofit? Well, you just start doing the work. And so we started on a Thursday night. It was around August 15th and 13 years ago, and we started, and from there then continued to grow. But my background really helped kind of shape me for this work. I was a pastor for many years, and in the midst of being a pastor, unfortunately had a bit of a crash and burn and lost everything, and went through a very dark season of my own life where I just wasn't quite sure what I should be doing. And at that point, someone recognized I certainly had some leadership abilities and said, have you ever considered working with the poor and the homeless? And I said, nope. And they said, well, you may want to consider it. And they actually ran a rescue mission. And they asked me if I would come and have lunch with them. And I thought for sure they were going to take me out to lunch, maybe at a restaurant. But instead, they made me eat lunch right there with all of the homeless guests and those in recovery. And I'll never forget that day. It was a powerful day, because as I sat there, all these men came up to me and were saying hi, and I kept crying. I just kept thinking, that could have been me, that should have been me, but for the grace of God. And I left that day, and I prayed a little private prayer under my breath. I just said, God, if you see fit to use me to give people a second chance in life like you've given me, then I'm open for business. And 3 days later, they called me up and said, hey, we're starting something new. Would you be willing to lead it? And I said, I don't know the first thing about homelessness. They said, we can teach you about homelessness, but we know you're a leader, because the church I had pastored before, I planted it from zero and it grew to several thousand. And, so I tend to be a bit of a builder, and that's just kind of how I'm wired. And so that was my entry into homeless services, and it's been quite a journey.
Wow, the power of prayer, right at work, right? I mean, literally 3 days later, that's That's amazing.
But the challenge is that I did have to take a 50% cut in pay. And so I had to remember that, I had made this vow, and I said, I said, God, if you see fit to open the door, and I felt like God did open the door, but it also came with a 50% cut in pay.
Yeah. Well, most things worth it. You have to cut pay, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we're super happy that, you had that calling. So Hope of the Valley created the first tiny home community for the unhoused in Los Angeles. You were able to help execute a more FEMA-like response to the crisis, and in doing so, creating hope for the unhoused neighbors. Last time you were with us, you were preparing to open your Arroyo Seco tiny home village. So how did that go? Can you gives us the up and downs and.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so last year was quite a year because we ended up opening in total 6 tiny home communities. And, the first one was on Chandler Boulevard in North Hollywood. That was 39 units. Then we opened up the next one, which was Alexandria Park, which is also in North Hollywood. That was 107 units. Then we opened up one in Reseda, which was 52 units. Then we opened up another one in Tarzana, which was 75 units. Then we opened up another one off of Satakoy Street in the 170 back in North Hollywood, which was 77 units. And then we opened up what was then the largest one in the country, the one off the Arroyo Seco, which was 117 units. And let me just say, the only way that was possible was because of the emergency declaration by Mayor Eric Garcetti in 2018. And why was that important? Because prior to Mayor Eric Garcetti declaring the shelter emergency, organizations like Hope of the Valley and others, we could only open up shelter, interim housing facilities in zoning that was C2 or CM, or by right. Sure, you could try to put it in other zonings, but you'd have to go for a conditional use permit. And you could only have 30 beds or less by right, unless you get a conditional use permit. And by the way, to get a conditional use permit means you have to have public hearings and you notify all your neighbors. Everybody comes out, yells and screams, not in my backyard. But the third thing that happened in this declaration by the mayor is that the city of Los Angeles can open up interim housing facilities in any zoning, as long as, number one, either they own the land, or number two, they're leasing the land. And that's how we were able to work in a public-private partnership to expedite the building of these tiny home communities, because the first one was on parkland. The second one was on parkland. The third one was a city-owned parking lot. The fourth one was a metro parking lot. The fifth one was a Caltrans right-of-way passage, of land. And then the last one was back to a rec and park site. And so in this partnership, working with the city, we were able to really move quickly this FEMA-like response to address the humanitarian crisis. And the good news is that with each one, the price continued to go down. There was a negative article in the LA Times about the very first one, Chandler, because the price per unit was about $120,000 per unit all in. Now that includes all your infrastructure, utility costs, the fencing and all that. But by the last one at the Arroyo Seco, the price per unit dropped down to about $42,000 per unit. And that's 2 beds per unit. So you're figuring about, $20,000 per bed. And, they're going to last, depending on how long, the crisis lasts, they're good for 20 years. And so, and the nice thing about these particular units is how quickly they go up. The entire village was erected in 90 days. Okay.
Wow.
90 days. The units themselves can be put together in 1 hour. The people that know what they're doing, because they flat pack them and then you basically stand them up, and then you rivet them on the sides and on the top. And inside you have 2 beds, you have air conditioning, you have heating, you have smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, 4 windows, and most importantly, you have a front door that locks. And especially for so many people who've been traumatized and women and have been abused and living on the streets, the ability to have a place to call home and to lock the door and to be safe and to have, it's interesting. Since last time I've been on the Zoom in December, myself and our CFO, we spent 100 hours unsheltered on the streets in December, willfully. Okay, and we were, as part of a project that we wanted to increase our empathy and walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And the truth of the matter is, I've never been unsheltered a single day in my life. I've always had a place to sleep, and I've always had food to eat. And so we decided to do this. And it was, we had to turn in everything, our wallets, any ring or anything we had to turn it all in. And they gave us, we had a jacket, a backpack, and a beanie. And we didn't know when they were going to release us to go out. It was the same day, December 15th, the Pacific storm was coming in. And I've been watching the weather. It was going to be in the upper 30s that night. And I asked them, the ones that were going to kind of orchestrate what was going to take place, I said, can you at least let us go out in the afternoon while the sun's still up so we can make provisions for the night? They said, nope. They waited till 7 o'clock. It was already raining, didn't know where we were going to get dropped off, and they dropped us off. Okay.
Where did they drop you?
It was in Granada Hills, and they dropped us off, and then we had to run to get under a freeway overpass. And there was a cut in the fence that we slipped in. And that first night I slept in dirt, literally freezing, shivering. And at about 4:30 in the morning, I turned to Rowan, who's our president and CFO. I said, this is stupid. I said, why are we doing this? I said, I'm freezing. I said, I'm ready to tap out. And he looked at me and said, yeah, those that we serve don't have the option of tapping out, do they?
Right, so you made it the whole 3 days?
Yeah, it was 5 days. Yeah.
Oh, so 5 days, sorry.
Made it for 5 days, but I had to beg for food. I got kicked out of a shopping center for no other reason than the fact that I looked homeless. I was, the fear, the anxiety, why do I talk about this? Because it just reinforced for me the conviction that we cannot leave people out on the streets. We know that permanent housing, supportive housing, affordable housing, that is the solution. That is what we need. But the streets can't be the waiting room for permanent housing. We must move people indoors, stabilize them so we can address those underlying issues that lead to homelessness and prevent people from being housed. And so my takeaway from spending 100 hours on the streets is that it is nearly impossible to stay sober, sane, and safe living on the streets. We must bring people indoors. And so these tiny homes, and that's exactly what they are. It's a rapid response to quickly build emergency housing to bring people indoors. It is not designed to be permanent housing. It is temporary. It is interim. But while people are there, people can move from survival mode to more success mode. And right. When people are on the streets, it's just a matter of survival. Where am I going to go to the bathroom? What am I going to eat? How do I make it through the day? But once they come inside, now we can begin to address those underlying issues.
Well, good for you for having that experience. So I have a couple questions more, but I want to ask you a little bit more about when you were putting up the first sites, you said the cost went from 120, down to what brought the cost down so considerably?
Well, the very first site, the building and safety made us pour concrete pads. Oh. Okay. And so every site, every one of the tiny homes had to have its own concrete pad. So there's a lot of infrastructure and rebar and bolting down on that. It was just unnecessary. The last one, we just bolted it right on asphalt. The very first site was a dirt lot that had no infrastructure. It had no water, no gas, no power. Right, okay. And so all that had to be brought in. The last one, there was water right there, sewer lines nearby. And so a lot of it is finding the right location that has the amenities that you can tap into instead of having to create all those amenities.
Yeah, especially if you're just at a park, there's no stuff. Yeah, so
yes.
that makes sense. So now you're just have economies of scale, efficiency. Is that what's really bringing down that cost? And then you're choosing the locations more effectively.
Yeah.
So that you have access to that. So that's amazing. So, in that journey of, from when you set up the first one to now, what were some of the biggest challenges that you had then that you really are not having now?
We've learned a lot since this is new. And again, this wasn't even allowable before 2018 because it wouldn't have met any kind of building code, but it is underneath this emergency declaration. If we had to do it over again, we probably would have more indoor congregant space. because the way they're designed, everybody has their tiny homes, but the dining is outdoors, the meetings are outdoors. There's a little bit of office space, but the problem with that is it's hot, especially here in the valley. You know, you have these constant days in the hundreds, and it's difficult for folks. You know, so I think I would create more office space, would create more congregant space. You know, some of the things we did right is, you know, we held public forums and public meetings and open houses, and we invited the community to come see for yourself, because it's easy to be critical of something new, and there was plenty of people that had plenty of critics. You know, those are nothing but you know tough sheds from Home Depot, and that's inhumane to have people living there. And my response to that is, go talk to the people living in the tiny homes. Okay, it's easy for someone who lives in a home to make that judgment, in a you know, maybe a brick and mortar home, to make that judgment.
Right.
Talk to the folks that live inside, and it's been a great success. Now, the pandemic has hurt us because, unfortunately, just like congregant sites and other facilities, that when there's a positive test, the site goes on quarantine, and unfortunately, people end up leaving the site, which kind of has impacted. But our housing navigators are working real hard, moving folks from the interim housing into permanent housing.
I'm curious, what's the average time that somebody gets into the tiny home to when they're placed to permanent home?
Right now, it's taken us 6 to 12 months.
And is that getting better, worse, the same?
I think now that we're getting on the backside of the pandemic, I think it'll get better. We were originally hoping 6 months would be the max, but what we're finding is just the lack of inventory of affordable and supportive housing. It bottlenecks. There just is not enough space to move people into. But my philosophy is, if it's going to bottleneck, I would rather have people staying in an interim housing site than on the streets. So right. Let's make sure we have a humane place, because let's be honest. If there was an earthquake and all of a sudden you had 60,000 people that were homeless tonight, the National Guard would be here within hours. They would erect some form of interim housing to make sure that our fellow Angelenos did not have to sleep outside in the elements. And so that's kind of the response that we're trying to have to this to the homeless crisis.
Yeah. It's so complex. Every day, right? All right. So the Trebeck Center is your first facility to offer on-site mental health services. Can you share with us other services you're able to provide for the residents? What does that community look? I mean, 6 to 9 months, that's, people rent apartments for 6 to 9 months, so somebody who's living there, how are the residents doing? How do you help them, with services in general? And, could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, as humans, we're pretty resilient, and we do tend to adapt to our environments. And, what we find is, we try to make our congregant sites, just like our tiny home sites, as user-friendly as possible, and to build in some natural privacy. So each person does have their own semi-private cubicle, their own space that they can retreat to. That's their area, that they can call their own. But in, like the Trebeck Center, that was, again, a cooperation with the city of Los Angeles. We purchased a 25,000 square foot roller rink. It's called Skateland, a very popular roller rink here in the San Fernando Valley in Northridge. We purchased that, and we went in, and the city helped us with funds to renovate it. And so we converted a roller rink into a 107 bedroom interim housing facility for men and women. And if you were to go there, I mean, it looks really nice. And we did honor Alex Trebeck, because Alex gave us the lead gift to build this out. And that was kind of a whole story in and of itself, how that came about. But so it is called the Trebeck Center. But on site, once again, when a resident comes in, they have not only just their cubicle space, there's a lot of congregant space. There's computer learning. We have a library there with all of Alex's books from his library. That anyone can go and read the books. We have a training center. We have a very large dining area, kitchen area, and a lot of offices for case management. But in this one in particular, we wanted to have mental health services available on site. One of the challenges that we have found is oftentimes when somebody needs mental health services and we reach out for mental health services, it's not uncommon that it could take 30 days or more before we get somebody on site to really help somebody. And so we wanted to bring it in-house. And it's been a learning curve because we're not a mental health provider, but we are beginning to branch out and to provide those mental health services in-house, which meant we had to kind of do some research even from database and making sure we're HIPAA compliant and in our case notes. But we were able to get a grant to fund 2 clinicians for the first 2 years. And then we've got another grant to hire another clinician for 2 years. So we now have 3 clinicians. And 2 of them are full-time at the Trebeck Center, and another one is starting outreach at the tiny home sites. And we're working, the longer I'm doing this work, I realize how important mental health services, behavioral health is. And so our goal is to be able to provide behavioral health at every one of our facilities. I know that's a big lift, but I think it's essential. And as much as we do rely upon our partners, I think there's some of these things that if we can bring them in-house, it allows us to control the process and to be more available for those in need.
Well, I'm sure we offer the case management, those services too. So we'd be offline, happy to share some best practices or what experiential with you for certain. So I'm just curious, how do people get to the Trebeck Center? Because you have, these are all over the vicinity. How do they get there?
Yeah, and they're all the same in the sense that we have 15 different facilities, shelter sites, interim housing sites, and someone who's in need does not just walk up to the door and say, I'm homeless, can I have a bed? That's not how the process works. We do have 2 access centers that are open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, that anyone could show up. Okay, so one's in Van Nuys and one's in North Hollywood. If they show up, they'll meet with a case manager. A case manager will do an assessment and determine where might be the best place for them to be housed if indeed we have beds available. But there is some geography and politics involved as well, because if a certain council member worked really hard to create these beds in their council district, they want to make sure that those beds are being used by people from his or her council district. And so sometimes it's, we can't just bring people in from other districts unless we work with LAHSA and the matching process. And, there's some challenges sometimes in that. So the objective is that council district has the priority. And anyone that's homeless in that area. So once we find out, there are outreach and engagement teams that are out in the field every day. LAHSA has engagement teams, LA Family Housing has engagement teams, and now we have our own engagement teams. And we're out there building relationships, talking to folks, and encouraging them to leave the streets, to come inside. And they will actually drive them to the facility with their belongings, and they will do a soft handoff to us. And so they'll then introduce them to the case manager, and the case manager will sit with them, do the assessment, the intake, and the orientation, and get them started in the process.
All right. So once they're housed temporarily with you, and then those facilities that you have, like the Trebeck Center, how do your residents get there? Do you guys have buses? I'm just transport, I guess.
You mean after they're living on site?
Yeah.
We encourage them public transportation if they have to leave to go to appointments or meetings, things like that. A lot of them do have bicycles, so they're riding their bicycles, or a lot of them are walking, and that's why we want to kind of keep them geographically. that's the area that they had experienced homelessness in. They probably are most familiar with the shops around there. So they are brought to us by the case managers, but once they're there, and then we also have staff that if they need transportation to a medical appointment or a mental health appointment, or they need to go to an apartment, they need to interview. We have staff that we have vehicles that are dedicated to each of our sites and staff that will drive them to those appointments and then bring them back. And as you mentioned earlier, also, we have 5 thrift stores. And so we work with our thrift stores to make sure people have the right clothing for interviews, for job interviews when they're going out. And we also have a job training and vocational training center as well in North Hollywood, where we're working with people to get them job ready, working on their resumes, interview skills, and helping them get jobs. And that's actually led by someone who was formerly one of our residents, who is now helping other people get jobs.
Yeah, that's great. You guys are the step right before they come to us if they were, temporarily housed. But, I know so many of our folks, the stories we hear, right, they were, still living in a car, still living on the street. And so, it's just amazing that you were able to put up so many units in a short period of time. I know you said that the process for somebody to get from your home into permanent supportive housing is, 6 to 9 months. But is there anything you guys have done, to improve that, process? Is there any best practices you can think of, or, help us understand what that journey, how it can get quicker so that we can get them in our homes a little quicker?
And I know sometimes, it'll be shorter when we do the assessment and the interview, and maybe we find out somebody has family in Las Vegas or family in Phoenix, and we have a foundation that will actually pay to reunite people with family. We obviously make sure that it's a good fit and that the family, is warm and embracing and understanding of what's going on. But there's numbers of people that we can end their homelessness quickly by just family reunification. Others, maybe we can link them to maybe they, served our country in the military, and we can link them to VA services and end their homelessness quickly. But others that are, they might have housing vouchers. That we're working with them to find locations. We do now have 18 individuals, staff members that are part of our housing navigation team, that are constantly, meeting with landlords and working with folks to try to find them suitable, affordable housing based on their income or lack thereof. And so, I'm thankful that we actually have an in-house team that's doing that. But for us, the biggest challenge we've had is just finding the right locations that are available that we can move people into.
Yeah, it's just because you guys are, I know I was on a call before we talked about the Cecil, right? But a lot of your locations are just a little bit, further, from that. But it's an amazingly complex situation. Curious, what's the next steps? What's your, any exciting things on the horizon? What's your next year look like, strategic planning wise, and support?
As I mentioned, we're 13 years right now. So, next month we're going to have a 13-year celebration. It's we're calling it, it's almost a coming of age. It's our own bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah. We're going from a kid to an adult, and in the process of that, we're actually going to have a name change also. Because when I was at one of the opening sites, I think it was in the one at the Arroyo Seco, Mayor Eric Garcetti was there, and he was introducing me, and he says, I feel like I can hardly call you guys just Hope of the Valley anymore, because you're having these extensions that extend beyond the valley. And it's something I had already kind of resonated with in my heart years ago. It was really kind of having more of a parent organization that was more ubiquitous, that was not geographically limited. And so, long story short, we're going to be actually changing our name. Very simple. It's just going to, instead of Hope of the Valley, it's just going to be called Hope the mission. And that's what, that way we can continue to, work to expand, to help people in different areas, because we are up in the high desert right now. Besides the existing facilities that we have, we were able, in partnership with the state of California and with the county of Los Angeles, to secure 4 hotels as part of Project HomeKey 2.0. And so one of those hotels is the Life Inn, which is on Alvarado Boulevard near MacArthur Park. And that's 43 units that's currently under renovation right now. I'm really excited about that one. That one was more of a prostitution hotel, and we've been able to go in there, and we're renovating it right now. It's going to be for families. It will be interim housing, working with the county on that. And then we were able to secure the 818 Hotel, which is in Woodland Hills. It's 100 units right on Ventura Boulevard, right across from Taft High School, and that will be 400 beds for families, mostly moms and kids. And then there's these 2. When we tried to, we wanted to find a location up in the high desert. I found a couple of hotels that would have worked, but the city of Lancaster said, no, we don't want it right by the 14 freeway. If you're going to make it work, you're going to have to find something on Sierra Highway. And Sierra Highway, if you've been up there, it's not the best area. And so they didn't think we'd be able to find it, but we did. We found 2 motels right next to each other. One is the Sands Motel, the other is the Tropic Motel. And we're going to combine them together into a complex that will be, it's 38 units, and that'll be for families as well. So right now we have these 3 projects that are underway. Also, while that's happening, we have plans with the health department. We are building a regional culinary arts program and kitchen that is capable of doing between 4 and 5 million meals per year. You can have 30 people at any given time working in the kitchen. And that is part of our, I'm sitting in our new headquarters building right now, which is a 25,000 square foot building in North Hills that we were able to purchase this year as well. So those are kind of the 4 main projects that we're working on, as well as we've taken on a number of other programs, some outreach programs, and also a reentry program, beds for people being discharged from prison. So yeah, a lot of different things going on. But
that's exciting. The food thing is very intriguing.
What's that?
The food facility.
Oh.
So yeah. How, I mean, is that the intention? You would just is that for your residents, or who would?
Well, right now we do have a central commissary. It's up in Pacoima, but it's just way too small. And so this new one, we cook all of our food and then we distribute it to the various locations, which it's a bit of an operation in and of itself, just the logistics of,
right.
Getting the food, cooking the food, delivering the food, bringing stuff back, cleaning it, and getting that out there for 3 meals a day. But we've just found it to be much more efficient doing that. So this will put us right in the heart, in the very center, right out the 405 freeway. So we have access to the 101, to the 118, 405 to be able to distribute the food. But it's also, it's large in that we'll be able to have this culinary arts program for training for people that are experiencing homelessness, to get them job ready, in the entertainment field or in the culinary, in food services. So, I know in the introduction it was mentioned, we had like 360 employees. We actually right now have 440 employees as of today. That was the number today. So, like many other nonprofits, getting good employees or getting employees sometimes can be a challenge. Retention can be a challenge, but we're doing our best to make it a place where people can not only have a job, but they can also develop a passion and a real sense of purpose in what they're doing in helping others get back on their feet.
Yeah, that's amazing. And like I said, I thought you didn't sleep with 300 employees, so 440, and all
I have
that.
a good staff.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, wow, so inspiring. You guys are doing so many things. So is there anything that you'd like to share, maybe I didn't ask you about, that you think our audience would like to know about your organization?
As I said in the beginning, we're just thankful. We're really thankful to be part of the solution. I think I probably go to bed every night feeling we're not doing enough. I think of that Liam Neeson movie. What was it, one, the World War II, when he was saving the Jews from the Holocaust. And I'll never forget that final scene when, you know, I think the Americans had come in and the war was over, and so many of the Jews came up to him and were saying, thank you, you know, you saved us, thank you, because he would hire them, and it was a whole process. And he broke down and he just started crying. And he said, I should have done more. I could have done more. He goes, I don't need this watch. Do I really need this gold watch? I could have sold that. I could have saved 4 more people. And he kind of went through this whole thing that is very emotional. And it just reminds us that we can do more. I tell our board, I tell our staff that we will not allow the shoe to tell the foot how big it should be. And it's easy to say, you know what, we've kind of reached our capacity. No, what determines our capacity is the need. And as long as the need is greater than what we're doing, then it is incumbent upon us to continue to stretch ourselves and to do everything we can to help as many people as possible. Not that we can do it all, but then we also have to be good team members and work hard to help and to, you know, reach out to the other organizations, you know, that are doing the work, and that we can really be a tapestry together and a safety net to help people in need. So again, I'm just honored. Thank you for allowing me to come and to, you know, speak a little bit about what we're doing. You know, we will continue to do everything that we can, and hopefully I look forward to, I will say this, the highlight of my year last year was when we were opening up this 5th tiny home site. Mayor Eric Garcetti was there, Councilman Paul Krikorian, and Councilman Krikorian said this. He said, you know, because we had opened 3 tiny home sites in his district and 2 congregant sites. I think it was like 470 beds just in his district alone. He said, I can now proudly say we have beds for everybody that is street homeless in my council district. And I thought, wow, that's a huge statement. And he had the will. And so I think when the political will is strong, then we need to allow that to fill our sails in the nonprofit world. And we need to put up our sails, and we need to go for it and to do everything that we can. So again, thank you for the opportunity to kind of share a little bit about Hope of the Valley.
Yeah, no, it's good. Now you're going to have to use your new name now.
That's right.
And you have sales right behind you in your picture there. Did you play on words with your background? Jed, I don't know if we had any questions, but you know, Ken, thanks for taking the time, and look forward to hearing all about, you know, you guys' future ahead. It's very exciting stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Ken, that was amazing. I mean, my phone has actually been blowing up with texts from team members, and so I do have some questions for you at the end. We usually do some announcements, so if you can hang around for a minute, we'll go to our team members. They're excited to talk to you, and they're inspired about what you're doing. And the first thing that I think everybody here is aware of, our gala is coming up September 22nd. We'll be returning. Sorry about that. We'll be returning to Zipper Hall at the Colburn School. We love the ability to host that party outside and then bring folks in for a program and get them back outside. This year, we are really honored that celebrity chefs Tim Hollingsworth from Odeon and Ray Garcia from Astrid are doing food. And especially thrilled to be honoring Wamimo Abbey, who is the founder of Isuzu Financial. They're a deeply mission-aligned company. And Wamimo and his team received a $1 billion evaluation from SoftBank this year to report rent payments to credit bureaus and help folks build credit without having to go into debt. And they have a micro-lending program so that if somebody runs into temporary financial trouble, you know, they can keep their housing and their credit. And they have a do no harm strategy. So if somebody falls behind, they just stop reporting the trade line. Anyway, we're very, very excited about it. Monica and Lisa and I will be reaching out, asking for volunteers, and we are currently, looking for sponsorships and single ticket buyers and auction items. So with that, the actions are pretty straightforward, and these are all live links on your screen. Buy gala tickets or donate directly to the trust. Add your voice to our advocacy actions as we're calling on our elected leaders to protect renters and preserve and develop housing and to preserve and develop more solutions like the ones that Ken and his team are bringing into the region. There's, people cannot wait on the street while we're developing permanent housing. Presumably you're on our mailing list if you're here, but you can always send that link to a friend and ask them to join up as well. And so with that, I know the first question or comment maybe is from Joey Garcia.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, hi Ken. I just want to start off by saying that I commend all the work that you guys have done and the work that's still yet to be done that's in the process. I really particularly enjoyed you speaking about, putting yourself in the population's shoes and really going out there and putting yourself in such a vulnerable state when you didn't have to. I've been working in this field for going on 14 years. And but before then I have a past of substance abuse and being homeless myself. So, to see someone in such a leadership role sacrifice that really honestly brought tears to my eyes, because in all the years I've worked and all the CEOs that I've came across, I have never heard such a story like that. And that just really, I commend you, and I have the utmost respect for you and what your agency and organization is doing.
Well, thank you. And if you'd like to see, we actually recorded, it's a YouTube video.
This is me, by the way.
Oh, how you doing? We have a YouTube, it's called C-Suite to the Streets on YouTube. And it kind of walks through what was that like. And I'll be honest, not having four walls, not having a roof, not having a door, not having adequate clothing, not knowing where my next meal was coming from. It put me in a very uncomfortable place. But the other thing I realized is it would be nearly impossible to hold down a job under the circumstances I was under being homeless, because I found myself having to make moral decisions that I normally wouldn't make. Okay, I took a shopping cart because I needed a shopping cart, okay, from TJ Maxx. I took it and I had to store my stuff there, but I couldn't just leave it because I didn't want someone else taking it. And so I really found myself experiencing these emotions and feelings that I've heard others talk about, and it just gave me renewed passion for those who are currently living under those circumstances, and for those who've come out the other side.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joey. And then we have a long comment in the chat, Ken, from one of our guests. I admire your going out and experiencing homelessness. It put you in a position to be empathetic, because with empathy, you're ready to act upon what you experienced, and that was great. I'm very happy for all the work you do. There is so much that benefits so many. Skid Row Housing Trust is a great resource for permanent housing. What are you not doing? And then there's a question here. Are the tiny homes standalone units?
Yes, and thank you for that. And the tiny homes are standalone units. The fire department has required that they be 6 feet apart. So every 6 foot, there's another one. Now, during the pandemic, it was much easier because we could have one person per unit. But now that now the Department of Health Services is saying you can put 2 people in the units. And so we've had to actually double up. And in 3 of our sites, we've already done it. It went much smoother than I would have thought. because initially there was some, grumbling. It's like, I can't live in this with somebody else. But we were able to do it in such a way that we had minimal fallout, and we've been able to increase our capacity, by doubling up. But yes, it is single. I mean, they are standalone, and then there's no bathrooms inside of them. There are hygiene restroom. They're big trailers like the movie industry. When you go inside one of the doors, there's a toilet, sink, and shower, and you're very private. But the cost of these tiny homes is around $10,000. So there's not a whole lot of money that goes into them, but it definitely sure is better than sleeping out on the streets.
I don't have any other questions for you, Ken, but we will follow up offline. And we're so inspired by what you're doing, and have loved, like I said, getting to know your team members, since we met you last year. And I just think there's so much more that we can be doing together.
That's great. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.